The Thieaudio Monarch MK IV. Let's talk about it. Now, this IEM was bought by me with my own money just for purposes of having a nice IEM that I enjoyed. These are custom faceplates. They cost a little bit more to have the custom faceplates done. They're called the Butterfly. And so my unit took a little bit longer to make. Having said that, this is an expensive IEM, so we're mainly comparing this to expensive IEMs, and it costs around $1,150, and this particular unit costs $1,300. Let's get into it. All right, the IEM on the right is the Elysian Apostle. The IEM in the middle is the Monarch Mark IV, and on the left we have the Afu Magic 1, just kind of for comparison. You'll notice that the Thieaudio Monarch is a large shell, but it has good contours. And so for me, it fits very well. It's a nice feeling and comfortable shell. But again, I could see people not liking it. For me, a shell has to be contoured and if a certain shape, and it fits in my ear securely. So this is an interesting shell because you can customize it. The Apostle is much more expensive. It's about $1,800 for an Apostle, but you know, this unit, you can actually get the shell customized. It is a titanium model, and it does have this rumble switch, which will show the frequency response of. It has a nice nozzle which holds onto ear tips well. It feels very durable and strong in hands, which may not seem like a benefit, but it makes sure that your IEM will last longer and have less durability problems. I've had multiple problems with IEMs breaking on me with just casual use. And so having a nice, well done shell is important because sometimes you drop your IEMs. It has a 2-pin cable connector, so it's easy to swap out. The Elysian and a lot of expensive IEMs will sometimes use MMCX, which has some advantages and disadvantages. These are accessories. You have a cleaning brush, a 3.5 connector if you want, some phone tips and some other tips. It's a fair amount of accessories, but nothing too exciting. This is the case. It's a fine case. I don't really use it. It's kind of a generic puck, but at least it has kind of an acceptable case, but nothing too exciting. They use the same one on the Origin. This is the case that I use for it. It's a Plus Sound case. I kind of like it. It's just a nice feel. It's about a $100 case. You can buy it in Plus Sound. They're an American company, so it's kind of expensive, but it's really nice. I use one for my Apostle and for my Monarch IV. Those are kind of my cases I like. As far as the cable goes, it's easy to take off. In fact, it's easy to kind of pull this off. Like if you're pulling at the end or from the cable, it's easy to pull that out of your amp by accident. It's a nice and fine cable. It feels supple, a little Thieaudio branding little here, kind of at the end, which is kind of unusual. I don't see that very often. You have the Y split, which is nice. You have the chin slider, which works. The feel of this IEM cable to me is very nice, and you do have a, you know, the connectors here also look very nice. I like the feel and the look of how they are. They look nice and are pretty darn great. Red right, blue left, little dots to help you know left and right. So how does it sound? For me, I really like it. It's easy to get. Like, this is a preference-based hobby. So everybody has their preferences and everybody has something that they're going to like. For me, I really like Thieaudio. It's not a flashiest set, but it's built very, very well. It has strong build quality, has unique features that really, to me, make this something that I wish cost, you know, $100 or $200 so everyone could afford. It's unique IEM. I really like the rumble switch with this IEM. It does affect the bass levels, which kind of, it's a little bit of a challenge to use in ears. Adds a little bit of pressure to your ears, but it's not bad. It's like somebody putting, you know, just a tiny bit of pressure which you apply, but it's pretty easy to do in ear, which is a very unique situation. So you can change the bass level of this basically on the go with extreme ease, with just kind of switching it in the back with your thumbs. It's kind of a cool feature about this. It's a great sounding IEM, and it's very unique in the market as it hits a lot of my preferences for what it is. It's a beautiful IM and a great shell with good drivers that are all branded, and it's a reasonable price. Well, I say reasonable. For some, it's very expensive, but it's a hobby that is generally really expensive, and there's a lot of IEMs that are cheaper that I think people are more expensive that I think people are not going to like as much. Let's get into some graphs. All right, so you'll notice that the rumble or red is actually in red, and it's actually a really nice tonality. It reminds me a lot of a few other IEMs, but some certain music sounds really good on that. Having said that, the rumble and adding a little bit of a bass shelf is nice. This is a very tactful amount of bass. It's not super crazy, or it's not going to throw a ton of mud into your music. But depending on the genre and depending on what you like, you might actually enjoy a little bit less bass. But you'll notice that like the red kind of hugs my target right in a good way. In some ways it doesn't, but it has some colorizations, which is really nice. And it's a nice overall sound. I like both profiles, but I found myself using the no rumble red switch setting. But I also like the gold switch setting for more modern kind of hip hop and rap sort of music, but it kind of depends on what I'm looking for. And honestly, they're both really good with just a few decibels here and there. I wanted to show the few other IEMs. This is versus. First one, I wanted to show the MK4 versus the MK3. And you'll notice that the MK3 I did review on, but my graph is a little bit janky. And so we're going to use HBBs real quick. But you'll just notice it has a ton more sub bass. It also has a lot of 3 to 4K energy, and it can be a little bit much. I feel that the treble on the MK4 for me and for what I like is done a little bit better, but your taste and what you like might be different depending. As we look at the MK2, I think, the MK2 is a lot more of a neutral set. Let's get rid of let's get rid of one of these. And you'll notice there's two different sets we had. I had graphed here. This is Mark Ryan's unit. You can tell it doesn't have a ton of bass, and like they kind of redid the Mark II. And so if you buy one now, you might have slightly different drivers and a slightly different tuning that looks a little bit more like this. And you'll notice is it has a bit more bass, a bit more kind of treble presentation. It's a really nice IEM, and it sounds fantastic, but it doesn't have a lot of excitement. For me, the MK4 has a little bit more excitement. It's a lot of fun. It's just a really nice, well-made IEM that feels like it's going to last a really long time because it has a really nice, well-made shell that I feel like it, in some ways, that's what you're really buying when you buy an expensive IEM. You're buying an IEM that's boutique, that's helping out a small company or a small brand, but when you can pay a reasonable amount of money and get a great sound and something else, it's kind of a nice thing. So I do think the Mark II is a good set. The fact that the tuning's kind of changed over the years, it's a little bit concerning. But there's also something to be said that I just think the MK4 has kind of gone in a direction that I think is a little bit more fun and clean and clear, and it's just really nice and a great set overall. And I definitely would take the MK4 over the MK3, which I wasn't a huge fan of, and the MK2, which I felt had a little bit better, smoother treble and didn't hit my like bad areas as much. And to me, it's the best Monarch that's out there. But how does it do with other IEMs? Now, my favorite IEM for a long time is the Annihilator. I recently sold it to kind of go on with different areas, but one of my problems was with it did have a little bit of kind of bass bleed a little bit here, but it never really came across. But let's look at the other rumble switch. Like the nice thing about it is that you can turn that bass amount off. One thing it does do differently is the upper air and treble. And so what you'll notice about that is that this 10K peak can be fatiguing or almost like cartoon-like, and it can be a little bit much, that treble detail for some people. And so that's just something to note, like that 10K peak is real, and that is something that can bother people. And so I'd encourage you guys to be careful. There's actually a little bit less detail from like 5 to 6K. And that becomes kind of one of those things. The Annihilator is kind of one of those IEMs that like people talk about it as this mystical IEM that's greater than anything. It's like audiophiles talk about it like mystical magic, but in fact, it's just tuned really well and tuned in a unique way. But I think that like the drivers, the setup of everything, I really like the Annihilator. And I wish you could find an Annihilator for a little bit cheaper, maybe in like a titanium Annihilator, but there's now a new company called Hexacraft, and they're coming out with a few IEMs. I'll be reviewing a few of theirs here in a few months, but that's just kind of something to note for later. But to me, while the Annihilator is a fun colorized sound, it lacks a little bit of detail from that 5 to 6K energy, which can be a nice colorization, and it can be a little bit bright to some ears. The Monarch Mark IV will actually hit really hard with a little bit more sub-bass focus rather than mid-bass focus that you get in the Annihilator. So while they trade blows, I kind of would go with the MK4 because it's a little bit more unique and I think special in that regards, and it does have that rumble switch and is in metal. So build quality, price, all these things to me make the MK4 very appealing and very strong at what it is. Other IEMs, another Elysium Apostle, the most recent IEM is the Apostle. I really like the Apostle. To me, it has a vocal forward nature, and what you'll notice in a lot of audiophile sets that I've noticed just kind of graph sniffing is that you'll see this huge kind of 1K peak here, and sometimes you'll see a little bit of a dip in energy, and so this becomes kind of an interesting set where the Apostle will never become fatiguing for me, has a different kind of some of this kind of 10K peak energy, but it can almost lack details. It does like a vocal forward presentation, and for me it's a very appealing set, but it's also hard to justify the Apostle to some people. While I personally like it, I think a lot of times the way I rank things and talk about things to you guys is how I like it, whether it's a good IEM or like a mainstream IEM. And the Apostle to me is a good IEM that doesn't get the nod that it's the best at its price. I think it's one of those IEMs that I personally really like and find a lot of joy in because I really like my vocals to pop out. Like certain genres of music that are very vocal heavy, I really like the Apostle because I feel it kind of helps just ever so slightly push those vocals slightly forward. And so that's kind of the differences between them. Whereas the Monarch will get more detail, more sub bass, a little bit better detail in this energy in the mid treble region. It really depends what you're looking for or what you want. As we look at the Valhalla is a very interesting thing. Like if you take out the no rumble switch, it's basically the same, but if you put in the rumble, what it does is that it gives you that variety to switch between two different tunings. Like I think the Valhalla is a fantastic set and one of the better sets that Thieves come out with. It has a metal shell. It's $2,000. It doesn't have the features of the rumble and no rumble switch of the Monarch Mark IV. I think it's a fine set. I think it's a great set. There's some things I didn't like in the treble as much, and I felt like the treble was done a little bit better in the MK4, and that's kind of my fault with that, but I think that's maybe the better way to go, but you have to kind of decide what you want. Another favorite of mine is the Europa. You'll notice the Europa, depending on which one we're going for, can be almost very similar to this. Very similar tonality. The treble's done a little bit different in the Monarch. You'll notice a little bit of elevated like upper air and treble, but you may or may not like that depending. The Crimson, I want to show you the Crimson as well. Like the Crimson, one of my faults with the Crimson, it had a lot of this 6K energy, had a lot of kind of upper air region. The Crimson can be a really good IEM, but again, it's one of those IEMs that you're going to like and find really cool and detailed, or you might not. And might hit some of your regions kind of weird. But the Crimson is a great IEM, but again, it doesn't feel as feature rich. It's a lot more expensive, and again, the shell doesn't fit me nearly as well as the other shells do. We look at the Europa. I think the Europa has a better shell, a little bit better tone treble. Again, it's also an expensive set, but it's like I said, Symphonium is one of the good companies, and I am excited for some of their releases just to see what they do. But to me, these are just some of my more favorite sets out there. Like the Europa is like one of my favorite sets. but for me, the Monarch Mark IV is a little bit better. Something like the Grand Maestro. You'll notice the FR are very, very similar for what they are. The treble and upper air detail of the Monarch Mark IV is better. And again, what you get, the Grand Maestro also has the ability to switch, but it has these little tiny switches that you can play with, but I've actually had them flip on their own. With the Monarch Mark IV, they're rugged. They're extremely well made. And I feel like when I want to switch on the rumble or no rumble switch and turn it off, it's very deliberate. And that gives me a lot of tuning switch problems. You can change out different modules in the Grand Maestro, but the problem is when I sit down to listen to music, I don't really want to sit there and play with little modules. It's just not really that fun of a thing for me. Although I can see how that would add value to people. But again, the Grand Maestro is like $3,000. And it's nice to see something with a similar sort of tonality with, to me, better treble detail and that technicalities that it is what it is. Now, you don't always have to pay a lot of money. Like one of my favorite new IEMs is the Luna. It's a little bit more kind of V-shaped, a little bit less upper treble, has nice upper air and detail. It's like an all BA set, and it's a nice little set that I really enjoy. And I think you have to find out what works for you. Like other sets like the Mangrid Top Pro. Mangrid Top Pro and this have a little bit, like almost a very similar set. Like you'll notice that this has a little bit less of that 5 to 6K energy, which can be fatiguing for people. Its treble is very, very similar. And it's just done in a slightly different way, and it's slightly more hard-hitting, the Top Pro, whereas the Monarch Mark IV, to my ears, is more balanced. It's again, the Monarch Mark IV is one of those IMs that sounds really, really good and has a great toy to play with. But there's always, like, if you want to talk, like the Top Pro and the Luna to me are both S-tier IEMs. I love them both, and I would recommend them both to people. But what are you getting when you get the best? It's almost like buying a sports car versus just, you know, a nice, like Honda or Toyota. You get something that has that extra, and that's kind of what the Mark IV is. And that, to a certain extent, even like say something like the Top Pro versus like even the Performer 7 or the Astral, you're just getting a little bit fancier, a little bit more pristine, and something with a little bit more, oh, what do you have? Oh, I have a Monarch IV. To me, the Monarch IV is going to change, maybe not the whole space, but it might change the high end for better to do a really excellent shell that I think people are going to like. The Thieaudio Monarch Mark IV, top of the list, 9.8, highest score I've ever given. Now, we've recently redone the list. I've talked about that in a video if you want to check it out. I think the bass in the Monarch IV is fantastic, but the way that it tilts, the entire graph tilts, that it tilts a little bit towards the mids and treble. And so it has a unique tuning philosophy that I think is interesting, and it is very strong and competent to the point where I would highly encourage people to try it sometime. I really think this is one of the best sets that I've tried in my life, and one of the more fun experiences that I've had. It gets a really strong recommendation, and it's really hard to fault. I think it represents something unique and special from the hobby. As this is my top one, I do have down on my sheet here, you can check this out sometime, but I do have IEMs ranked at each price at what I think is the best and by each brand. So if you want to check that out, you can yourself. The Monarch Mark IV. Should you buy it? I don't know. It's hard to say. But finding a metal shell that's customizable, that's a huge thing. Having a rumble switch custom that you can change on the fly, that's also a huge thing. EQ is a beautiful thing, and I encourage those that can't afford it to try EQ and to mess around with it to see what works for you. But because of, I think the word is length mode residency, the way the shell will sit in your ear due to tips can really affect the sound. To me, this fits in my ear. It works for me. I fully enjoy it. I like the black shell. I like the faceplate that I got to choose myself. It adds something to it. This is my own unit, but I just thought I'd give a quick share of this with you. I have a few other things on my desk that that I need to review and to look at, but I thought I'd finally get through this because I had a few people asking me about it. Thanks for watching my video. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Go! Go!
Go!
Go on with you!
You're mid, you're mid, you're mid, you're legendary. You're mid, Jay out.